That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about Capone, which will be available on digital on demand May 12th, 2020, courtesy of Vertical Entertainment. It is the third film directed by Josh Trank and stars Tom Hardy playing the infamous gangster Al Capone during the last year of his life.
What are this director's first two movies?
Well, Chronicle, which featured Michael B. Jordan and Dane DeHaan, and he directed the last Fantastic Four film in 2015, which was taken out of his hands and infamously had a lot of reshoots, and it was kind of a major debacle.
Oh, okay.
But at least it didn't star Jessica Alba.
Oh. This film is very simple. It is just the last year of Al Capone's life. He was suffering from the last stages of syphilis.
Neurosyphilis. It was in the...
So he basically he was acting like he had late stage Alzheimer's.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. His family, so he has been let out of jail or prison. Due to his condition, so he goes back home to his palatial estate
in
Florida, but the feds are still watching.
Yes.
So his family, which looks like he took care of an entire dynasty, they're all struggling for money, it seems. Mm-hmm. So the subplot is them trying to figure out if he had money hidden and where is it.
Yeah, purportedly, he had hidden away $10 million, but he, due to his ailing mental health, forgotten where he stashed it.
It obviously wasn't found, or...
No.
So... But I think the shining feature of this film is Tom Hardy playing Al Capone because...
Well, that's why we're going method with this review. Yeah, if you had any doubt about Mr. Hardy and his method ways, look no further than here. He sounds like a reptile.
He sounds like a monster.
Yeah, this is like the portrait of a monster.
So I thought it was comical. You enjoyed the movie more than I did.
I did. It does take some getting used to, and it's almost... it is a shame, I think, that the rest of the film doesn't match his weirdness, and it feels oddly juxtaposed with him, because you have Matt Dillon as his mentor, Kyle MacLachlan as a doctor that's tied in with the feds trying to find out where this money is, Linda Cardellini as his long-suffering wife. It doesn't really quite fit, and it does take some getting used to. And I know you saw Bronson back in 2008, where he's
the boxer,
where he's the prisoner acting out his alter ego, Charles Bronson. Back when I liked Nicholas Winding Refn, it's like Bronson by way of his Batman villain Bane, with the voice and everything. It's
sure. Okay, so basically, I think this movie is well done, mm-hmm. and I think the acting is strong. I think Tom Hardy is doing a good job with whatever he's trying to do. It's just so out of control for me. He sounds, it's comical. It's comical. There are a few scenes where he kind of rants and raves because he's losing his mind that I think are comical. He poops on himself.
Yes.
Twice or once?
Well, a couple. Yeah, once in the bed, and then while talking with the feds.
And then talking to the feds.
Where he's represented, his legal representation is Neal Brennan, the co-creator of the Chapelle show.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure. Okay, so then there's that. So you found it more appealing than I did. I guess my bigger question is, what is the purpose of this story? Because Al Capone is not a sympathetic figure, and what is occurring in the film is not we don't get a sense of his poor family and they're struggling, and we don't really care about those people either.
No, and
Al Capone is not portrayed as someone who we should feel sorry for. He's not he doesn't change his ways. He's still awful and nasty.
I think it is trying in a very simplistic way to show kind of regret for some actions that he's done, because he's haunted by visions of his past. He's hallucinating, and I think it's supposed to be reflecting that guilt, but I don't think it's ever really quite strong enough. To me, this feels kind of like a superficially staged Scorsese film. The Irishman, which you didn't watch, came to mind with kind of looking back on one's life with regret. And then there's also a very violent stabbing sequence, which I can only believe was an homage to Joe Pesci using that pen in the neck in Casino. Capone is such an intriguing infamous figure. He's been portrayed countless times. Like I just rewatched The Untouchables, where De Niro plays him in the De Palma film. You know, Jason Robards, Rod Steiger, Eric Roberts, William Forsythe. A ton of people have played Al Capone. So at the very least, I think what Hardy does is kind of original in using those parameters, comparing him to other Capone caricatures. Sure, but
yeah, I agree with that.
and I think it was trying, because the working title of the film was Fonzo, which is what he's called in this, and one of his old cohorts refers to him as Al, and Linda Cardellini, the wife, says we don't use that name here. So I think it's trying to show, you know, not the softer side of Sears, but basically the fact that he had a whole other persona that is never really ever delved into, because he's
that's
a monster.
my issue. Yeah, like we don't really know any other side of him except being this like sort of maniacal, controlling, you know, criminal.
But I did like, because you can never really trust that any of this is actually real, because it's kind of from his perspective. But I really liked the hallucinatory aspect of it. It felt very Kubrickian even. The point where he stumbles upon Louis Armstrong singing Blueberry Hill felt very The Shining to me. Although I had to look up, Blueberry Hill was a famous song in the 40s. In 1940, there were multiple recordings of it, but Louis Armstrong's particular recording didn't happen until after Capone's death. I also was a little bothered because it opens with a black screen, and October 17th, 1931 gives you a little rundown on Capone, and then says 10 years later, but actually 10 years later, he died in 47. So the timing is off, and I wish that Trank had, because he wrote it and edited it, I wish that he had also, because it made me go back and do research about how syphilis was treated, blah, 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 blah. Because there's lots of films dealing with figures from this period that had syphilis, like Isaac Dinesen, played by Meryl Streep in Out of Africa, or Florence Foster Jenkins, played by Meryl Streep too. People had syphilis and were cured of it, I think, at certain stages, but it's something that isn't developed. Like, nobody's really addressing it. It's just like, yeah, he's got syphilis, he's got brain rot.
Yeah, I'm unsatisfied. I had questions that weren't answered. I mean, like you said, I had to look them, or you looked them up. And overall, I think this movie is worth watching just to experience Tom Hardy's performance, because it's unhinged, in my opinion.
It is, and
I'm predicting that he will not get critical acclaim for it. I think that he might get some Razzies for it.
Sure, I still found it enjoyable. I did not like the part where he sings, because he's doing a private screening of Wizard of Oz in his home, and he does he starts singing "If I Were the King of the Forest" when the Cowardly Lion comes on, and I thought that was a little over the top. Also, there's a lot of Puccini over and over again, to the point where I'm like, where is this? He must have had a love for Puccini, and you know, De Palma used that in Untouchables as well. It's just that it's never really, you don't really get a sense of who Capone is or was just by watching this film.
Sure.
I did really like the soundtrack. LP, who's an underground alternative rap artist who also worked with Trank on Fantastic Four. I think that it's got an eerie, fantastic soundtrack. I liked the look of the film. It was shot by Peter Deming, who has worked with David Lynch several times in Mulholland Drive and Twin Peaks, and it really does have that feel. Although in some of its more over-the-top moments where, you know, he shoots an alligator point blank, or there's the dream sequence where he's sucked up in the water. Like it's almost a little over the top sometimes.
Yeah.
Where it's not fitting. But there were things in the screenplay that were weird and good. Like there's a repeated refrain about "dig where it's wet." That at the time, it's about a woman's wet vagina in one scene, and then is used again later on to great effect, I thought. I don't know. And I like Kyle MacLachlan. I like Matt Dillon.
Okay. We can be done. What would you give this film?
I would give it 3 out of 5.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye.